Hey guys, it's Tuesday.
And you know what that means. I'm Amber.
And I'm Alex.
And this is True Crime and Chill.
Okay, so first off, happy belated Mother's Day to all the moms out there right now. Even though this is going to be airing on Tuesday, Mother's Day was Sunday, so we all hope that you had a really, really good time. Are you or did you do anything fun, Amber?
I went to my in-laws, my soon-to-be in-laws. Spent some time with his family. My parents are out of town because the floor is being redone after the fire that we had. So,
Amber's dad learned not to put non-rechargeable batteries in a rechargeable battery thing.
I will have a scar shaped like a AA battery on the bottom of my foot for the rest of my life.
That's pretty epic though. I went to a friend's house and had some smoked pork butt.
Yum. Right. Hashtag worth it.
And I got this really cool cup from this lady in town that makes these. And look it's a Golden Girls cup. There we go. I am so in love with it because I love Golden Girls. So yay to this lady. This week's case has been one that I've been wanting to do for a while. And Amber knows this because every week I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this case. And then every week I end up doing a different case that ends up catching my attention because I have the brain, I literally have the attention span of a goldfish and it's terrible. But like I said, other cases came up and this one kept getting pushed down the list. So finally, this week, we're going to do a case that I've always been interested in. And it is the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders.
Well, let's get to it.
Okay, so before we get into this, we do need to say our disclaimers. We are not law enforcement, lawyers, coroners, doctors, anything but two women who love true crime. So we are human and we get things wrong. If you notice a tiny flaw or a huge flaw in any of our cases, please politely reach out and say something. We love to make sure our information is correct and to correct it when it's needed.
Yeah, but really, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, right?
Yeah. Also, one of these days, I'm going to create a drinking episode game for you guys for one of our episodes. So, see how many times I could say in an episode in the future.
Or and stuff.
Or and stuff, yeah.
And stuff is probably the biggest one.
And stuff. So, let's get into this case. Our story actually starts 2 months before the actual murders happen. Okay. So Camp Scott Girl Scout Camp was located on about 400 acres in Mays County, Oklahoma. Okay. This place has been open for over 50 years at this point and everything. Like, this place has had thousands of girls come through their camps for their events. And I believe that it wasn't just Girl Scouts that did, camping there and everything. I believe it was other groups as well.
I don't know, because I think it was a specific Girl Scout.
Well, it was a specific Girl Scout camp, but they would have sometimes weekend away things for smaller groups and everything, where they would do the 3-day Friday, Saturday, Sunday weekend group and everything.
Yeah.
But those were very few and far between, but it would mostly serve Girl Scout camps. Yeah. Honestly, looking at it, it really reminded me of the Fisher Cove camp for Girl Scouts that's out in Port Angeles on one of the 2 huge lakes that we have and stuff. And I used to go to this Girl Scout camp all the time. Fisher Cove, I was there all the time. It was huge. It was distance from people. It was very beautiful. There was a lot of trees. It was in the middle of the forest. The only thing this one was missing was the fact that it didn't have a lake like ours did.
Camp Scott reminded me a little bit more of Camp Colloqua out near Tulalip here in Washington. It's this camp I actually send my son to, and the way it's spaced out reminded me a lot of the way Camp Scott spaced out, except they use actual cabins rather than tents on platforms.
Yeah. Now, for those of you who don't know, for those of our lovely listeners who do not know, my co-host Amber is actually a huge camp geek.
Yep.
She was in Rainbow Girls and has actually helped be a counselor and run some of the camps as well.
So with Rainbow, I was Grand Camps. I was responsible for the 3 camps, the Masonic campgrounds basically, that are owned, and making sure that the service got done to make sure that they were kept up. And then I ran a 3-day camp out, but also I was very involved with Campfire. And they had a resident camp out at Camp David Jr. on Lake Crescent that I used to, it was I started going in 2nd grade and I went every year. I went as junior counselor, I was a senior counselor, I was director. I
So
maybe miss.
you're very familiar with both sides though,
Yep.
like the camping as the camper and then as the counselor and stuff.
Yep. Absolutely.
So yeah, so you get it. You get
Mhm.
it.
Oh
So
yeah.
when you saw this, you thought, but I actually have a kind of like I guess like a little mock-up thing of Camp Scott and everything of like what it would look like, of
Mhm.
well, what it did look like.
Mhm.
So you guys can kind of see like just what it looks like. So you see, like, you have like down here, we have like the swimming pool and the Great Hall, and we have like, directors, health office, ranger's office, and then you see like these like little tiny camp areas around here. These are all the different little camp areas that the girls could stay in.
Mhm.
And each of these camp areas had about 7 to 8 cabins that were situated inside of those camp areas. Now, just imagine that on a bigger scale, just so that way you know what we're talking about. And this picture will be found on truecrimeandchill.com as well, on our website. But this is just kind of like a little like, hey, like just so you guys know,
Yeah.
like what we're talking about when we're talking about it.
Yes.
So it's the spring of 1977. Okay, great spring. I don't know. My mom apparently loved it. I don't know, but counselors were out at camp doing basically training for the upcoming camp that would happen in June. Like I said, Amber has been a camp counselor, so you would understand like
Yep.
what it means, like what it means to do that. So what was some of your experience with like going out and becoming a camp counselor and training for that before the campers came?
So there's a number of things that we would do. With Willowchi, we would go out like the night before, and we would
Hmm.
do like team building exercises. We would also do things like decorate the cabins because our cabins all had kind of like themes, and we'd make it fun.
Yeah,
But also, it was just a chance for us to go out and be out there without all the kids. So we could go swimming, we could have a campfire, we could do all the things that were fun without, having that idea of watching the kids all the time.
yeah,
But for us, we would do a lot of training prior also because we all lived in the same area. So we would do like first aid training. We would talk about, what happens when the campers do this. These are the activities that we want to do. Who wants to lead what activities? What to do if a camper says in the middle of the night they need to go to the bathroom, just kind of putting in their heads the things that you do with these campers. You kind of go from start to finish. Like you wake up at this time and you have to do these things because we need the campers all out of bed. Then you come
yep,
up for breakfast, and then it's time to clean your cabins, and we'll have clean this cabin. We go through the daily schedule and say, this is how it is. This is why we're doing it. This is when you get a break because it is
yeah,
a job. Because I know even when I was a counselor, I had trouble sleeping at night because I would be on a really low level of like my attention would be at high. So I'd be like barely sleeping. I would sleep just barely. So when I got home, I would just crash for like 3 days. But
yeah. So, but basically, that's just kind of like you guys would do the same thing that these counselors probably
yep,
did: is go out and just
get it set up, do
yeah,
basic training, do first aid training, and just get established on the campgrounds. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So whereas you guys would go out probably like 1 or 2 days prior, these guys would go out for training. I think the trainings were maybe like a week long, 2 months before.
And the
So
reason is because my camp was only a week, theirs was all summer long. And a
no,
lot of
theirs
the
was only two
counselors,
weeks. This one
okay,
was only this one was only a 2 week long camp.
well, I know like with Colloqua, they have week long sessions all summer long.
Yeah.
So,
All the articles that I read, it was only a 2 week long camp, and then had another 2 weeks break, and then another 2 week long. But they would bring in like different counselors and everything.
yeah.
So it was very rare that the same counselors would ever do it, would
Mhm.
ever do the same thing. So, but basically, for those of you who may not know, they do this so the counselors can, get, like Amber said, get trained on different things and what they need to do to make sure the campers stay safe, how to run the camps, what the kind of games, like, the fun camp songs that we learn and everything and stuff
But
like that, like setting up all the arts and crafts, like basically just getting the camp ready for the girls to come.
yeah.
So while these counselors are at these sessions, okay, someone had broken into a tent and ransacked it, taking items as well as leaving a note in a donut box, which is a really random place to leave a note, but okay. The note was, it was pretty long. It was filled with a lot of gibberish. It was just super random, but there was something on the note that really stood out saying, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in tent 1." Now, like I said before, like when I showed you, like I said, like I showed you with the picture, which will also be on our website, True Crime and Chill. The there were multiple campsites with multiple tent ones and stuff. So it really was kind of like a, okay, like that's weird. That's specific, but not really
sounds
specific.
like a cruel prank.
Yeah,
rather
it
than
was really
something
kind of
serious.
dismissed as a hoax, I guess.
Right.
Also because the letter went on to talk about alien abductions, like I said. But however, the sessions were canceled. People were sent home. Parents were never really notified about the break-in or the letter when they brought the girls to camp.
Right. I mean, I can understand why they didn't say anything, especially if they thought it was like a prank or a joke. But things were stolen and they weren't found anywhere in the camp, and that should have been a huge tip-off, honestly, that maybe there was somebody in the area nearby. But you know, they were out in the middle of nowhere, so who's going to be out there, right? And the tent ransacked again. That should bring a little more awareness and possibly a warning. Like I probably would have said something, but it's 1977, and the way they would get information out would take a lot longer than it would now. Now we can send emails, put up a Facebook post, send out text messages, call cell phones. Then you'd have to type out a letter, make copies, put them in envelopes, address every single envelope, send it all out.
I'm assuming they had a phone list for all the parents.
Sure, but you know, at this time they only had phones in their home, and maybe they had an answering machine.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I understand, like, if the letter had just said nothing but, like, random stuff, it would make a lot more sense, and obviously no need to worry. But with the tent being destroyed and saying that they were going to kill 3 people, like, I, as a parent, would still want the chance to know, so that way there would be a choice on my end if I wanted my kid there or not. And
disclosure was different, though, in 77. It really was.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's really true. But also, the letter, like, nothing about the letter ever came out until after the murders.
Right.
And so the counselors went home, and the camp got ready for another session of camp that began in June.
Right.
Fast forward 2 months, it's the morning of June 13th, 1977, and Camp Scott is in full swing, opening up for yet another 2-week camping session with the Girl Scouts. And let me tell you, when I was in Girl Scouts and I went camping, it was a huge thing. I always camped with the Girl Scouts. Every year, every time they went camping, every summer, every spring, every fall, like, it didn't matter. I was I was there. I was gung-ho.
Yeah.
So that's how all these girls were. Now, these are all really young girls. I think actually nobody was above the age of 12 in this group. And if they were, they had just turned 12. So these were all really young girls from like the ages of 8 and up. And like, they were babies. They were tiny. So
that's
3 girls in particular
we have at Willowchee. So
yeah. But they were like itty bitty babies.
Yeah. Yeah, we had ages 6 to 12 basically.
Yeah. So 3 girls in particular all had different experiences before heading to camp. Now, we had Lori Lee Farmer, who was just 8 years old at the time camp started. Okay. Her 9th birthday was actually going to be that following Saturday. So I believe she was actually going to be spending her birthday at camp, which honestly, I got to spend one of my birthdays at camp one time, and it was the funnest thing ever. Like, my Girl Scout troop leader, like, ended up getting me a cake, and there was like, it was fun. It was really fun. So she was very much a, like, very tenacious girl and stuff. And so this was just a huge thing that she wanted to do. Yeah. Denise Milner was 10 and Michelle Gies was 9. All 3 girls were paired together in Tent 8 of the Kiowa. I think I'm saying that correctly. Kiowa?
Kiowa.
Kiowa.
Oh,
Kiowa.
Right.
That's right.
Kiowa. You're right.
Kiowa. So all 3 girls
different
were paired
Native
together.
American dialects.
Yeah. All 3 girls were paired together in Tent 8 of the Kiowa Camp. Now, I'm going to show an actual picture of the Kiowa Camp. And the picture can also be found on our website, truecrimeandchill.com. Okay. Okay, so you have, like, so this is the Kiowa campsite. Okay. So this is the counselor's tent. These are the tents for the girls, and this was the 3 girls' tents. Right. Now, a little later, I mentioned this, but I'm going to mention this now just in case before I forget. In a lot of stories, you hear that the girls were in Tent 8 or Tent 7. It's because Tent 1 was reserved for the counselors. In every single camp, it was Tent 1 was the counselors, and Tents 2 through 8 were for the girls. So sometimes people would say, oh, they were in Tent 7 because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So we're just for sake, we're just going to go for it with Tent 8 right now because it'll be easier.
Yep.
But you can kind of see, like, the bathroom over here, and then you can see, like, the campfire right here. And then this is kind of like a shower house / like kitchen / like storage area type.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look, you can see, like, the tents are basically pretty spread out.
Yep.
Okay. Like, the tents are pretty spread out and stuff. Like, they kind of make up a crescent shape with like I said, the small little kitchen shower thing in the middle. So it was like the shower / like kitchen thing right there. And then the latrine was like all the way over in the corner.
It wouldn't be a shower kitchen thing because they had like a lodge where they all had their meals and stuff.
So it used to be a shower. So it used to be like so it's like the way they described it with it was like this, like, where, like, the counselors can store their snacks while they were at that part of the camp, so they didn't have to go all the way back to the lodge. So it was like a kitchen thing, but a kitchen
like
thing.
A pantry rather than a kitchen.
But they called it a kitchen thing because you could still have food in it and everything and stuff. You just couldn't cook a whole meal in there. But if you wanted to, like, keep a cooler full of food and stuff like that and everything, that's what they did.
Okay.
So, like I said, tent 1 was used for counselors. 2 through 8 were used for the girls. That's why you sometimes hear a mix up with the tent names. But like I said, when you look at the pictures, the tents look really spaced out.
Yeah. So I'm going to take just a second here. At our camp, we had cabins.
Yes.
And the counselor and the junior, it's like most of the cabins, I can't say each because there were 2, Humakana and Kohani, and also Beach Cabin had like one room with all the bunks in it. And then a lot of the other ones like Neonda and Crazy House. And
this was at Camp David.
Yes.
Yes, I remember Camp David.
Had 2 rooms with like an entry, like common room area. And so you'd have a counselor on one side and a junior counselor on the other. I didn't start going to camp though till the 90s, and it was very, very explicitly like campers are never to be left alone, period. In fact, one year I was there as a junior counselor. They fired a counselor because she happened to walk through the junior counselor meeting to go brush her teeth. And it was just like, well, what the heck are you thinking? The number 1 rule is you don't leave the campers by themselves. That year I got promoted to co-counselor. And so I never even did a full year as a junior counselor. I immediately basically became a counselor and I didn't look back. So, but so seeing this was interesting to me because the counselors all stay in one cabin and but this is again, also 1977. Kids used to play outside by themselves up until the late 80s, early 90s because
that's how it was with me though, out at Fisher Cove. And out at, like, we would go to Cove and we would go to Lyle McLeod.
Because there were only like 4 bunks to a tent. So
we wouldn't have a counselor. We wouldn't have a counselor in our areas.
No, it was a lot more spaced out.
Yeah, we did not have a counselor in our areas with us. So Fisher Cove, the way it was put out, it was kind of put out like this, where you would come up, there's a great hall, there was a hill leading down the lake, there was one like single cabin right here. And then you go up these long stairs.
It's ridiculous.
And there'd be like 6 different campsites with tents, and they were kind of like the tents, like the ones that they have here at Camp Scott.
Almost like shacks, but made with canvas walls.
Yeah, and they ended up tearing them down and rebuilding them just because they were getting all gross and yucky and stuff like that. But with like Lyle McLeod, we had cabins,
right?
Almost.
And Camp David Jr. was cabins with electricity.
Yep.
But it's also got a super dark story that maybe we'll have to cover in another one because it was a sanitarium for a while.
Yeah.
I've had some weird experiences out there.
Yeah, no. But so, like, we were allowed to be alone in our tents now, in our tents and everything. So when I read that they were allowed to be alone in their tents, it really didn't alarm bells for me because I was like, oh, okay, like we did that too.
Right. Also 1977.
Yeah. What was kind of weird to me was the fact that it was like spaced out. Like there was a lot of space in between each cabin.
Yep.
And you can't see the girls' cabin from the counselor's cabin.
Not this particular one because of that pantry area.
Yeah, because of that area right there. Because of that building right smack dab in the middle. So you can't see what's going on right there.
For the record, this is also an all-girls camp. So there's a lot less of those things that you worry about when it's a mixed.
Yeah. But so later on, people would say it felt like the tent that the girls were killed in was a lot more isolated from the other tent. Like their parents actually went out there and was like, I wouldn't want to sleep in this.
No.
Like this is out here.
It would be an older girls' tent, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Michelle, Lori, and Denise were all the girls in 810. and then 8-10. So Michelle, Lori, and Denise were all the girls in tent 8.
Yes.
Like I said, Lori has always been described by her mom and dad as someone who really wanted to be the leader. Okay, she's 8 years old. She wanted to do everything the big kids did. She always wanted to be the one to take the lead. Always wanted to be the one that went head first into things. Like she was there. Like she was just like,
She was a
oh, you don't
spitfire.
think I can do this? Let's do this and everything. And so she was actually the one who brought up the idea of going to camp to her mom in the first place. She's like, Mom, I really want to do this. This is something I've been thinking about. I'm going to be 9 soon, which, like, at that age, she's basically like, I'm basically an adult. Like, I can do this.
Right.
And so her mom really had no issue with it just because she knew how Lori was. And she, obviously, like, you wouldn't have an issue with it. Well, she ended up choosing, she had the choice between a YMCA and Camp Scott that year. A YMCA camp and Camp Scott, and she ended up choosing the Camp Scott camp.
I mean, and from some of the stuff I've seen, it looks like that's really stuck with her mom over the years, that she didn't try and talk her into going to the other camp. But how was she supposed to know?
Right? Like, it's not like you wake up one day and think, oh, if I send my daughter to this camp, she's going to die.
Right. And like, honestly, I worked at a YMCA camp one year. Now it's changed significantly, but one year I went and worked a week at YMCA camp. It was way less structured, and I was like, I'm never working a YMCA, because like the campers were allowed to just wander the campgrounds when I went, and I was like, this is not okay. Like at campfire camp, we always are like, where are you going? When are you coming back? Why are you going there? Blah blah blah. There, my campers were just trying to leave, and I was like, where are you going? They're like, oh, we're going to go explore. And I was like, okay, I need to know where you're going. Well, none of our other counselors have ever cared. And I'm like, I don't care what your other counselors did. I'm telling you, I need to know where you're going, because if something happens, I need to know where to find you.
Yeah.
Well, we never thought about it like that. Like, yeah.
Duh.
So,
yeah. Yeah. No, I
personally would have been like, you're going to the Girl Scout camp. Like, you don't get a choice. But that's because my experience
you don't
is different.
know. Again, you don't know. So now Denise was described as a mama's girl. She loved her mama. She didn't like to be away from her mom. She didn't like to be away from her 5-year-old sister, Kathy. Like, Denise loved Kathy. So when she was begging to go to camp, her mother was hesitant because, she would go to a friend's house for a sleepover, and then 9-10 o'clock at night, she'd be calling her mom, begging her to come pick her up. It happened every single time. So when Denise brought up going to camp, her mom was like, no, we've been down this road before. We're not going to do this again because you're going to want me to come pick you up on that first night. Denise kept begging and begging and begging, Mama, please, Mama, please, Mama, please. And so finally her mom gave in and decided that it was okay. Leading up to camp, so like 4 days before camp, Denise did the same thing. She changed her mind, tried telling her mom she didn't want to do it, tried begging her mom not to let her go. Her mom said no, go out and spend at least 2 nights out there, and we could talk from there.
Yeah, I'll come get you. Yeah,
go spend 2 nights,
right?
And if you still don't like it, then I will come get you, and you can come home. Which is again a good thing to do with kids. I tried finding a lot of things on Michelle, but her family has really kept to themselves after the murder. Yeah. From what I could find, she was a very active little girl. She was involved in a lot of sports. She really, really, really wanted to go to camp.
Was she the one who was a grade ahead of herself?
I didn't find anything about that.
Yeah, there's one. I can't remember which one. The blonde girl, the little blonde girl. Lori was actually a grade ahead. Like, she skipped a grade.
So that would have been Lori, which honestly,
which makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense because that just seems like Lori. But Michelle was just she just really wanted to go to camp. She was writing letters to her mom and dad the night she died. She actually wrote a letter to her aunt. Mm-hmm. Now, like I said, a lot of people don't remember, but there was actually a 4th camper that was supposed to be in the girls' tent that night.
Right. And Angela was her name, right?
Yep. So Angela ends up doing an interview years later, when she was an adult and everything. I can't find any much more outside of just the small interviews that she has done, probably because of privacy reasons, which is fine. But from old reports, she was originally supposed to be in a different tent, but then she got moved to tent 8 with the other girls because her troop didn't have any room in the tents that they were in. Mm-hmm. So she had conversations with each of the girls individually. She got to know them. She started meshing well with them. She was really excited to be with them during camp. And then probably right before they went to bed, somebody came in and was like, hey, we ended up finding room for you in your troop's tent. Do you want to stay here or do you want to go with them? Angela said she doesn't know what possessed her to switch cabins, because she said that she really liked the 3 girls that she was with. However, when you go to sleepaway camp, you want to be with your friends and your troop that you go with and stuff. You don't want to miss out on anything that happens inside the tent.
No.
So she says that's something that's stuck with her always, is the fact that she could have been the 4th girl in that tent that night.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't be sitting here if she had chosen to stay.
I think the outcome, I mean, it's hard to say. It's hard to say, because maybe 4 would have been too hard to subdue, and it may have had a different outcome.
But I mean, 3 would have been too hard to subdue as well. However, maybe it was also some kind of like child intuition. Like, Denise's mom has actually said in a report where when they were driving away, Denise's sister Kathy, after they dropped Denise off at the bus, because all the girls met at the main camp headquarters, and then they were bused to the actual campsite.
Right.
So Denise's mom said that as they were driving away from the headquarters, her 5-year-old daughter Kathy starts asking questions like, "Well, where do people go when they die?
Yeah, what happens when you die?
Yeah, what happens when we die?" And she goes, "Well, we die, and then people are..." Actually, hold on, I have it written down right here. I have it written down. Haha. In my notebook of notes. But she goes, she wanted to, well, what happens when we die? And she goes, people die, and then people are born, and then life goes on, and stuff. And she goes, okay, well, what if everybody dies? And she goes, I mean, everybody's not going to die at the same time. Like, people are born and people die, and life goes on. Like, yes, people do die, but life does go on. And she just kind of very quiet, and then Kathy very quietly just kind of goes, tomorrow everyone's going to die. Yeah. And I'm sorry, as a parent, that would have freaked me out, but at the same time, you can't really, show that much freaking out, because you're like, okay, is this just some creepy, kid talk, or is this, something I should really be paying attention to? So I'm thinking maybe, Kathy had this, just like Kathy had this, this childhood intuition, Angela had this intuition that as much as she wanted to stay, something else was telling her to go. So it's just, it's really weird. It's really scary, and it's really weird. So later that night, some of Angela's friends and her went to the bathroom. Okay, so they were going out to kind of go to the bathroom and everything, and how when you're at camp, it's that first night, and everybody's all jittery in the middle of woods and everything, and people are like, oh my god, it's a twig snapped, and it could literally be anything, but you freak out. So they end up seeing 3 flashlights just kind of roaming through the woods and stuff over at the campsite.
Right.
They figured it was some of the other campers, and screamed, laughed really loud and everything, and did their little giggles, and it caused the lights to go out. So they end up running back to the tent. They calmed down. They got ready for bed. They calmed down for the rest of the night, and they stayed there.
Yeah.
Another thing that happened was the weather got really bad.
Oh, and it was bad before bedtime, but yeah.
Well, yeah, but so the weather started to get really bad before bedtime. And if you've ever been to Oklahoma, we both have, we know that the weather is super finicky. It can literally change on the dime. So you could wake up and it could be sunny and 95, and then all of a sudden, 3 hours later, it's downpour flood conditions.
Hail, tornado.
Yep.
Yeah. Tornado sirens are my favorite.
It's so much fun. So the girls were basically stuck in their cabins because of the rain, which wasn't an unusual thing. I grew up. Well, we both grew up in the Pacific Northwest, so we're both very used to rain during our cabins, during our camping experiences and stuff. So
yeah, I mean, Camp Willowchee was always in August, where we get very little rain, but it would still happen. And there were a couple of times. That's how I learned I could sleep through thunderstorms. Because they've got the metal roofs on the cabins, and I would sleep right through it.
Oh my gosh. So the girls are basically stuck in their cabins. During this time, all the cabins basically end up chatting with everybody, writing letters, playing cards, doing kids. Whatever else they wanted.
Yeah. In fact, at camp, we would tell the counselors, because they'd always our kids just won't go to sleep. I'm they're excited. There's a lot of adrenaline. Yeah, but I assure you, if you just let them stay up tonight, tomorrow night, they will crash. So just let them be excited. Tomorrow they'll be tired, and they will all crash really early, which will make it easier for you.
Yep. And yeah, it was just very something that...
Yeah. That's
totally normal.
Totally.
So the last moments of the girls in Tent 8 will forever remain a mystery. Like, we will never know exactly what happened, just things that were kind of pieced together. We do know that the girls had all wrote letters. All three girls had letters written, because all three girls had letters written. Lori was talking about how much she loved camp. Denise was begging for her mother to come pick her up and how she didn't like it.
Right.
But she did meet two girls that she had become friends with.
Mm-hmm.
Michelle had written her aunt and was actually about to start writing her parents. The letter to her parents actually just had "Dear Mommy and Daddy" on it. So that's all she had gotten out on that letter. Another little fact was Lori loved to play cards. And she had packed away 2 decks of cards. One of them was packed away in her bag. Another one was spread out around the tent and everything. Right. Lori's mom thinks that Lori had them out when she was attacked just because she couldn't sleep. And, like first night jitters, she couldn't sleep. And she probably was just playing cards to kind of just steady herself.
Makes
which
sense.
It's kind of comical to me that an 8-year-old would be playing cards. But I mean, again, it's the 70s. So you never know.
I used to play cards all the time. All the time.
I mean, I played solitaire when I was younger, but that's about it. So,
like War and Slapjack, and I love cards.
Oh my god! Don't even get me started on War. Oh my god! So that night, probably about 8, one of the head counselors in a different camp said that she had looked out, kind of towards the tree line and saw a light shining over in the tree line and stuff, and she was like, "Okay, that's weird." She got her own flashlight. She raised her flashlight up, she lit it up, and she pointed towards the tree line. And as soon as she put the light on, the light in the tree line went out. Mm-hmm. So she kind of looks for a second, doesn't see anything, so she turns off her light, but she continues looking towards the tree line. A few minutes later, that light in the tree line turns back on and starts heading northwest towards the Kiowa Camp.
I mean, it's odd.
Yeah.
But with the amount of girls and counselors there, because the Kiowa Camp section was one of many. There was a lot. It was just the farthest removed.
It could have been somebody going to check on the camps.
Right. So with the amount of girls and counselors there, it could have been any of them. And in the rain with all that mud and everything, I don't think I would have gone out there to look. I would assume it was somebody out there they should have been in their cabin.
Yeah, and like I said, it could have been one of the adults going around checking on the camps, because I remember being at camp, whoever was on night shift at that time would go around and check all the camps and make sure everybody was good and stuff, and talk and chat with the counselors a little bit.
100%. Like yep.
And again, how are they supposed to know who or what it was?
In the middle of the frickin' woods, out in the middle of nowhere in Oklahoma. Yeah.
Yeah, right? I'm not going out there. Are you going out there? I'm not going out there. So later in the night, one of the head counselors of Kiowa, Carla, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but it's Carla Willets. I think that's how you pronounce it. She was one of the head counselors of Kiowa. Mm-hmm. And she had woken up, and it was late. She had woken up, and she heard really loud grunting noises, almost guttural. Yeah. But it was really noises that she honestly couldn't explain. She's later on in interviews, she would go on to be like, it sounded like it was an animal, but it wasn't an animal that I had ever heard of.
Right.
And stuff. So she was like, plus it was late, when you're late and you just wake up out of a dead sleep, your mind plays tricks on you.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, unexplainable noises that can happen in any woods, especially when you're nowhere from people for miles.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you're in a place where you're not familiar with too. Your mind plays tricks on you. So she tried really hard to listen. She really did. She tried really hard to listen to what it was. She woke up the other girl in the tent, but she was too groggy to really comprehend what was going on. Again, this is probably about midnight, 1 o'clock-ish. She couldn't really pinpoint an exact time because she wasn't looking at a time. She just knew it was late enough for her to have been asleep for a bit.
Yeah.
She ended up trying to go and investigate, but the noise ended up stopping completely as soon as she hit the kitchen area. So as soon as she hit that little kitchenette building, it just stopped. And she thought maybe it was an animal. She ended up shining her flashlight around. She kind of checked the openings of the tents and stuff like that, but didn't really see anything. And so she went back to her tent and went back to bed. Yeah. Now, like I showed you in the pictures, Carla's tent was that first one.
Yeah, tent number
so
1.
Around 6 a.m., she's going up to the trail because she wanted to get up early enough to go take a shower before the other girls got up.
Right, because that hot water goes so fast.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, it does. So, like you had said, all the showers were in the main hall, the main shower area and everything. So Carla would have to walk outside of her tent, go behind the tent, and go down the trail. Which again, I'll show you guys this picture just so you can see what we're looking at right now, because this is very much something that is easy to explain. So Carla would have to come out of her tent in this area. Okay, so it says that these are showers, but we know that she didn't use these because she had come out of her tent to come down this way to go to the main shower area. And that's when she had come across a sleeping bag in this area. Sleeping bag in this area right here. Okay.
Right.
So she looks at it and she thinks, oh, well, that's weird. Maybe it's luggage that the bus had brought up that didn't quite make it up the day before.
Which happens.
But she thought, why would they put it here? Why wouldn't they put it at my tent? Or why wouldn't they put it at, like, the kitchenette area or the main hall or somewhere?
In the storage area because it's been raining.
Exactly. So, well, that's the thing. I can't drink. I can't think. That's the thing. The sleeping bag was dry, which is why she didn't think much of it.
Right.
She gets closer to the sleeping bag. She realizes that it's not just a sleeping bag, that there's a body inside of it. And it's a very, very tiny body.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sad. Like, police officers later on at the scene would say that they would come up on these sleeping bags, and it wouldn't even look like there was anything in these sleeping bags. That's how tiny these girls were.
Mm-hmm.
So she sees this. All she sees is a foot. That's it. She doesn't see anything else in the body. She just sees a sleeping bag and a foot and realizes they're not moving.
Right.
And she takes off back down the trail.
Yeah.
She ends up getting to the main like counselor's tent, like where the Great Hall is, and she's like, there's something up here. I need help.
Yep.
So soon the area was just surrounded by adults because the discovery of the other two bodies had happened as well.
Yep.
They all end up herding all the girls out of the Kiowa camp down a different section of a trail so that they wouldn't be going towards the body.
Right.
And they end up getting all the girls out of the other areas of camps and into the main hall. So you had all these Girl Scouts and all these counselors and all these adults who weren't like aware of what was going on because they weren't up at the Kiowa camp meeting in the Great Hall, just waiting for news of what happened next.
I mean, I don't understand how they would. I mean, I get why they would do that. That's probably how I would handle it too. In fact, one year when I was director, I was taking a nap because it was the middle of the day and I was pregnant and didn't know it. And so I couldn't figure out. I was so tired that week, and a boy slipped on the wet grass and broke his collarbone.
Oh my God.
And so we had to call an ambulance, and his parents took the week and went to Vegas. So we had to find a way to call them. And it was like this huge mess. And we just kind of kept everybody away from the upper field, let everybody else finish their days and do their other stuff rather than having them panic. But we had to have the ambulance come, and it was fortunately at the upper field. So, that's where you enter at the camp. And so we didn't have to have them, going all the way through camp or anything. But
yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, you got to take precautions and stuff, but
and keeping them out of the way is in the best interest of everybody. But I mean, I don't know how I would handle it at this level from an administrative perspective.
So,
I mean, what did they think was going on? Did the other counselors know?
And I have this look on my face because the administrative level that they handled this at was a really bad level.
Oh yes, I know. But it was
nobody knew what was going on. Yeah. Like Carla knew, obviously. The head counselor at Kiowa knew. Carla knew. The main adults knew.
Yep.
The other counselor at Kiowa did not know. She was just told by one of the adults, you need to get the girls, calmly take them down this trail, take them to the main hall, and you will be linked up, and we're going to go from there.
Yep.
And she goes, well, why? And they're like, everybody's going to know down there. So everybody was basically told that something had happened to the camp water supply. It wasn't safe to be there anymore. It wasn't safe to drink because they needed water. And they would need to be going home. So no big. All the girls were all bummed because I was like, oh, okay. But all the older camp counselors were like, that's weird.
Yeah, we've been here for a couple days, guys.
That's suspicious. Well, no, this was the first day of camp.
Right, but the counselors are there.
Yeah, the counselors were like, that's weird. Yeah. That's suspicious. But they didn't say anything because it wasn't their place. Right. And so, however, on the other side of camp in Kiowa, instead of calling the parents of the three dead girls, the police were called to the camp. Okay, and then the camp gets on the phone with two others before calling the parents.
Mm-hmm.
They called their lawyer and their insurance agents.
Yeah.
Which, okay, so the logical side of me is like, I understand why they called their lawyer. I understand completely why they called their lawyers, because their lawyer needs to be like, look, this is how you are going to call the parents. This is how you're going to address them.
Mm-hmm.
However, their insurance agent is kind of making me go, you guys were really trying to save your own asses here, which is understandable, but at the same time...
Unless the lawyers suggested to call them immediately.
But at the same time, it's like, why would you not call the girls as parents? Because as soon as the police arrived up there, news started going.
Yeah.
Most of these parents found out that 3 girls were murdered before the camp even got it out to the parents.
Yeah.
Michelle's parents found out on TV that their daughter was murdered. They just didn't know it was their daughter yet.
Yeah, there were parents that didn't. So after they sent all the girls back, that's how most of the parents found out that it was their kids, is because their kids didn't get off the bus.
So they were able to identify Lori and Denise. They were able to identify all 3 girls at the campsite, because Carla was able to tell them, no, this is Lori, this is Denise, this is Michelle, these are their parents and stuff like that. So they were actually able to contact the parents before they went to the main, because they ended up not even going to the main area. They were picked up by police to go to the police office, the police department, first thing. So they knew that something was going on. They just didn't know the extent of it until they got the phone calls. However, Michelle's parents saw it on TV first and then got the phone call. So when they got the phone call, they knew that something was going on. But they were expecting a phone call of, Michelle's fine, we need you to come pick her up. Instead, they got the phone call of, we have some bad news.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting here like...
Story time. A long time ago, I used to do a lot of like babysitting and camp and blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
And there was a kid I used to babysit who went to a camp for I'm not going to say what kind of camp it was, but it was a sleepaway camp. Mm-hmm. And they went on a day hike and he disappeared. He was missing overnight, and they did not call his mother until after they found him.
What the
Oh, yeah. They found him beaten on the ground at the bottom of a hill. Like, not just like injuries from falling down the hill, like actually beaten. The boy suffered brain damage. He has never been the same. He was a neat kid. I mean, he was a cool kid. He was funny.
And this was at a camp that you were...
No. And he was beaten and thrown down the hill. He didn't remember anything. He didn't talk again for a really long time.
Did they find out who did it to him?
No, because he couldn't remember. He blocked it from his memory.
So they don't know if it was anybody at the camp or not?
They assume it was kids at the camp because he was hiking with a group and there were counselors there. Yeah.
Oh my God.
But they didn't even call his mom until after they found him the next morning. So you want to talk about uninformed parents?
Yeah.
Like,
that's...
He was alive. He's still alive today. But...
Oh my God. See, and that's what I don't get. Like, I get... But, so, like, Denise and Lori's parents were called. Yep. And then that's when they saw the news.
Yep.
And they were like, oh my God.
Right.
Michelle's parents saw the news and were called. Now, Angela, the 4th girl that was supposed to be in that tent, so she's on the bus. She had actually dropped something on the bus, so it took her a few minutes to get off the bus. So when they were sitting there, they were calling her name and calling her name and calling her name.
Yeah.
And stuff. Like, Angela, Angela, Angela. And, like, her mom is, like, having a meltdown because her baby is not getting off of that bus.
I would.
Yeah, she's like, her baby. And at this time, the girls still don't know why they had to leave camp. All they see is they come in on these buses and their parents are all freaking the hell out. Yeah. And so Angela gets off this bus and she sees her mom just like on the ground with people's arms around her. She's just screaming her daughter's name. Yeah. And she's like, what the heck is going on? And like, it wasn't until a lot later that a lot of the girls found out what happened. Because a lot of the parents did keep it from the girls. It wasn't until a little bit later that Angela had found out what had happened.
How do you tell a 10-year-old?
I wouldn't want to tell my kid, like, hey, you were almost one of them.
So my brother, who is now an officer, okay, when he was in kindergarten, his best friend was shot by his stepfather.
Yeah.
And of course, he died.
Yeah.
And that messed my brother up for a long time.
Yeah. Kathy went to a child psychologist after Denise died, and they said, "Oh, she's not going to need any help." And it's like, yes, she did. And Kathy didn't actually get the mental help that she needed until after she went to college. And she
How do you
realized,
process that as a kid when you learn to trust adults and everything? I mean, how do you even process that?
yeah. So, like I said, as these parents like gathered at Camp Scott's headquarters, waiting for these kids to get off the bus. Mm-hmm. Denise, Lori, and Michelle's parents are all taken to a different place. Mm-hmm. And at first, they're told their kids died in an accident. Yeah. Okay? An accident. They don't say, hey, this is what happened. They say it was an accident. So, like I said, it wasn't until the news started breaking out that it came out as a murder that the Girl Scout camp was like, oh, yeah, by the way, they were murdered. It wasn't an accident. We just have to say that.
So, wait. So they were called, and then they still showed up to the where the buses were?
No, so they were called, and they were told that they needed to come to a different location.
Okay, that makes more sense.
So they were called, they were told they needed to go to a different location. So while everybody was meeting at the headquarters to get their kids off those buses, the three girls' parents were all at a different location being told what was going on. But on the phone, they were like, there's been an accident that involves Lori. There's been an accident that involves Denise. There's been an accident that involves Michelle. Right. Michelle's parents knew going into that, though, because they saw the news that it was a murder and not an accident.
Yeah.
So back at the crime scene, okay, so while these parents are processing what has happened to their kids, back at the crime scene, the police were just baffled because because even though they saw, that these girls were strangled, they had all been severely beaten, they had all been sexually assaulted. It's terrible everything that happened to these girls. They'd all been sexually assaulted. They really didn't have much to go on. At the crime scene, all they found was nylon rope, duct tape that was used to bind the girls, a flashlight with a piece of newspaper stuffed inside to push the battery up to make it work and stuff. It was a really weird thing.
I've had to do
and a crowbar.
Like huh? I've had to do stuff like that. So
yeah, you got to jerry rig certain things or whatever. It's whatever. And they found a crowbar. They also found stuffed inside the sleeping bags with the girls bloody rags, mattress covers, clothes, basically anything to clean the blood with.
Yeah, they used them to clean up the blood from the tent because it was
so whoever killed them tried to clean up the blood, just stuffed it in with them. So from the bodies and the crime scene in the tent, they were kind of able to figure out that sometime the night before, somebody had entered the tent from behind the tent, mm-hmm. which would explain why when Carla looked out and she didn't see any kind of weird issues with the tent flaps, that's why, is because they came in from behind the tent. They attacked the girls, essentially. So Lori and Michelle were both sexually assaulted and killed inside the tent, while Denise was either led outside because they did find footprints outside that matched her footprints, mm-hmm. but they don't know if it was before or after or they don't know where it came from. So she was either led outside or carried or dragged outside and killed there.
Yeah.
So, and she was also sexually assaulted. In fact, she was the last one to die because Michelle and Lori were both very cold, had early signs of rigor mortis already setting in, and Denise was still warm to the touch when police got there. Yeah. So it was a very traumatic thing for everybody who came up on that thing. They were then moved to the spot that they were found, like I showed you guys, over by the lead counselor's tent, somewhere between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. They know this because their sleeping bags were dry. Yeah. The rain had stopped that night by 11 p.m. So, I mean, obviously they had not mildew. Obviously they had dew and stuff like that on it, but they weren't soaked like they would be from the rain.
It's not the same.
Yeah. But it's just, I don't know. I can't get over how the camp handled it in the first place with the parents. Lori's parents go on to say, and I read you this. Lori's parents go on to say, oh yeah, they, where is it? They wanted to know stuff about their daughter's last moments and stuff. What did she eat? What was she doing? What did they do? What was she doing last time the counselor saw her and stuff like that?
Right.
And she always said that the officials always treated her as kind of their enemy rather than a parent who lost a child. She was it would have made a great deal. She said in an interview, quote, "It would have meant a great deal to us if they just treated us like a mom and a dad. They did absolutely nothing to comfort us," unquote. and so like they wouldn't tell her anything, and so like some head of the organization actually comes out and is like, well, we definitely protect the image of a good organization. The reason why we're concerned is because we know that we have the best program for the girls available in the world today. It's just a horrible thing that happened, but people get killed all the time at national parks. Look at Chandra Levy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, reading this, like, ma'am.
Yeah.
3 girls were killed at this camp. I understand that this may have made all the Girl Scout camps in Oklahoma a lot safer, which we'll get into later on in this episode.
Yeah.
But if these parents are coming to you and going, what were they doing in their last moments that the counselor saw them? What did they eat?
Yeah, I don't feel that they're unfair questions.
Give them something.
Yeah.
Something.
Right.
Like, it doesn't hurt to give them something.
Mm-mm.
So, as you can imagine, people were chomping at the bit to find out who had done this to 3 girls, including the girls' parents, obviously. So Lori's parents, basically said, like I said before, they went on to ask about their daughter's last moments. They went on to try and fight the council. And, to this day, the Magic Empire Council basically just shuts them out. They ended up having this huge lawsuit against them. I think Lori and Denise's parents, or it was either Lori and Michelle's parents, one of the two, it was Lori and another one of the girls' parents, ended up suing the Magic Empire Council, who was in charge of the Girl Scout camp, for endangerment and stuff and wrongful death situation. Yeah. They won, I believe.
I'd be like, negligence.
Yeah, and they won. But the thing is, it's like you can see it from the defense side too. Like, how are they supposed to know that somebody was supposed to come in?
Sure.
However,
it's not that; it's how it was handled.
However, and I'm not laughing at this because it's funny. I'm laughing at this because this is definitely something that should have come out. So eventually, police started searching the areas around the camps. They also realized that Tent 8 wasn't the only tent that was visited that night. Others had been visited and were missing glasses that were placed around the camp.
Eyeglasses.
Other things were missing. It was eyeglasses.
Right.
So it was just eyeglasses. It was really weird. But other campers mentioned that they had seen a light kind of passing over their tent flaps, and they figured it was the counselors. They didn't say anything.
Yeah.
Some people and so go back to the glasses. So eyeglasses from the girls' camps, including the head counselor's camps, including Carla's camp, were missing and placed randomly around camps, around the camp and stuff. And some people speculate that this was to give whoever did this more time to get away, because if you couldn't see, then you couldn't catch them or see what they were doing. So eventually they found out that the nylon rope that had been used to bound the girls had come from a farm in the surrounding area. Now, the farmer swore up and down, I was robbed. I put in a police report. That wasn't the only thing that was taken. He had taken a lie detector test to prove his innocence, and it came out as negative. However, we all know the media, and the media has not changed, especially since the 70s. The media went crazy and ended up running with him being the killer, even though he wasn't the killer. It actually caused him so much strife that it caused he needed to be hospitalized.
And we've talked repeatedly about how the media handles a lot of this stuff. So.
Oh yeah, and it was bad. I have hold on, let me see here. It was bad because I have the newspaper headline. So they basically had a newspaper headline that said he was the murderer. Murderer and Girl Scout slaying being looked at, and it would show his face and it said Slayer across the top. They were just so, and it's the thing is they were so desperate to get that first story out. And I'm seeing this right now, and this is a huge example. I'm seeing this right now with the Delphi murder cases on Twitter, in real time, that they don't have a suspect. They do not. Some guy ends up getting arrested a state away from the Delphi murders for a completely different thing. And all of a sudden people are like, oh, he looks like the guy in the sketch. Meanwhile, one of the sisters of the girls that were murdered has come out and said, look, law enforcement does not have a suspect. They're not looking at him right now. If they decide to look at him, then we'll go from there. But we're telling you right now, we do not have a suspect.
Yeah.
I'm seeing it in real time right now. And it's insane. It's insane.
The internet makes it worse.
It's insane how many people want to be the first on the scene with the story, even if it's wrong information.
Yep.
So once they cleared up the farmer, and this is where I'm laughing because it's I'm sitting here going, oh my God, you guys, really? they realized they didn't really have many suspects. That is until a sheriff mentioned that there was a convict on the loose in the area who had escaped 4 years prior and was like I said, in the area, named Gene Leroy Hart. Gene was a local football star that had been in prison already because he kidnapped 2 pregnant women and assaulted them and tried to kill them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, he'd been out for 4 years and they still hadn't caught him, which says a lot, which probably why they were not wanting to mention it because, this guy escaped 4 years ago.
Thing. They decided to hold a Girl Scout camp in the middle of the area where this guy was or suspected to be.
But the thing is, I don't think the Girl Scout camp knew. And that's not their fault.
The thing is, why would the local law for 4 years? 4 years this happened.
Right.
I'm sorry. Until that guy was caught or I knew he wasn't in the area, I wouldn't be running any camps.
No kidding. Especially not ones like this.
Yeah, so the police dropped the ball on that one. Huge. Okay. And what's even weirder is that when the detectives went back and talked to these women about the assault, one of them said that when he was raping her, he was making these almost inhuman sounds. And when she tried to describe them, she couldn't. And that he was playing with the other's glasses, trying to try them on.
Boy, that sounds, I don't know, like his MO.
Like the sounds you hear. Well, and then another thing is he ended up shoving like a rag in their mouth and then duct taping their entire face, mouth, nose, eyes, everything. The only reason they survived was because this woman who had testified was able to give a statement saying that she had managed to get some of the duct tape off an airway. Yeah. And so she could breathe while she was trying to escape. Yeah. And then she was able to get the duct tape off her face and move it out of the way and help the other woman.
For the record, she accredited religion to that. Just throwing that out there in case you ever look up to it.
I mean, she did. I mean, who knows? At this point, it probably was a miracle of God. Like, who knows? Like, same reason why Angela was not in that tent. But at the same time, Lori's mom has brought that up where she would hear people going, "Thank God it's not my child." And she goes, "Why are we thanking God? Because why did God make it be my child?" And I'm sitting here and I'm like, it's a very touchy subject.
It is. I wasn't discrediting the religion. I'm just saying, just so you know. And there's also another interview that happened in one of these documentaries where the guy is saying how much Indian medicine he used to help solve it. But
yeah. And like we'll have all these documentaries and interviews on our website, truecrimeandchill.com.
Yep.
So the glasses thing, the police were like, "Oh, okay, this has to be our guy. Like, what other person can do something like this and has an obsession with glasses and uses nylon rope and duct tape to bind somebody in the same area?" So police started looking in the caves surrounding the camp, and they end up coming across one that had a bunch of stuff in it, and it looked like somebody had been living in it. They came across nylon rope, a newspaper, plastic covering, women's underwear, a crumpled picture of a woman, and a pair of women's glasses. All of these things were connected to the camp in some way or another. The rope was used to bind the girls. Yep. The women's underwear came from a counselor at the camp, as well as the glasses, and the newspaper was part of the paper that was stuffed in the red flashlight. They were curious about the woman in the picture because they knew that if they found her and found out who she was, they may be able to tell them about who was living in the cave. So they placed a nationwide ad in the newspapers, and a wedding photographer came forward and was like, "Hey, like, I took these pictures. I got them developed at a prison." Yeah. And they're like, "Oh, okay. So you mean the inmates developed them," which is a really common thing. Yeah. Working at Kentucky State Penitentiary, you see a lot of inmates who do like jobs. They do real world jobs.
Yeah, they give them jobs. And at the time, film needed to be developed, and a prison makes sense because they could have absolute dark rooms. It makes sense to me.
Can you guys guess who developed the picture?
Do tell.
Gene Hart.
Shock.
Right? So at that point, Amber's shock face pretends to be shocked. But so at this point, the police knew they had their man. Eventually, Gene was caught and arrested and charged for the murder of the girls.
Yeah. That's kind of a funny story too, but we don't need to get into it. You can look it up.
that is a very longer story that would make this episode like 3 episodes long. Yeah. So eventually, Gene was caught and arrested and charged for the murder. Going into the trial, it was insane. Gene was a local football hero, and even though he had done some horrendous things to other women, people thought he was innocent in the murder of this, including his own lawyer, who still, after Gene died, kept saying like he was innocent. Yep. So, mainly because the defense tried to use the fact that Gene had a vasectomy. So there was absolutely no way that the sperm that was found on Michelle and Denise could be his, because when you have a vasectomy, you can ejaculate, but there would be no active sperm in it.
Right. It's only semen. It's not sperm.
Yep.
Technical
However, it
terminology.
was sperm. However, and because when I heard that, I was like, wait a minute. If he had vasectomy, it wouldn't be sperm. So I looked. No, it was sperm found at the scene. It wasn't just semen. It was sperm.
Right.
However, it came out after Gene died in prison that the vasectomy did not take.
Yeah. Well,
Which means
that they didn't discover that till after he died, which was long
but
after this.
that means that the sperm was his, which ties into it.
They also did some DNA testing, but that's a whole
other. They did a lot of DNA testing and everything, and they were able to link him to it, but a lot of people thought that he was still innocent because he was framed.
For the record, the DNA testing they didn't do until like the 90s, and this happened in 77. They were smart enough to take some of this evidence and secure it in a way that they could test it later.
Well, they tried to do a later testing in 2017 just to be sure.
It had been too destroyed, though.
Yeah, but it had been too degraded. But, I mean, if the vasectomy didn't take and they found sperm at the scene, so there's still a large group of people thought he was innocent.
Oh, yeah.
But with the trial, it was really bad. Like, there was a lot of information showing that he did it. However, a lot of people think that he didn't work alone because how the hell can one man subdue 3 girls?
I know.
Like, how the hell can one man subdue 3 girls? Or the other huge thing was he was being framed because he was a Native American.
So, first of all, there's a lot of Native Americans out there.
Yes.
Okay? I am descendant from Native Americans who were on the Trail of Tears. So, part of that is my heritage. I will be upfront about this. I have also spent time in Tulsa, and for the record, I freaking love it there. Okay? Except for the time I slept through the tornado, but that's a whole other...
No offense to our fans in Tulsa or Oklahoma in general. I will never go back to that hell site. Ever.
However, the thing is, I forgot where I was going with this. Where was I going with that? What did I say? Been to Tulsa. Oh, yeah, heritage. So down there's a lot of Native Americans, and yeah, the discrimination is there, but it's like here, there's a lot of Native Americans too, right? Like we have the Clown tribe.
Like Port Angeles is built. We have a Native American reservation. Like we have more Native American.
3. We have 3.
Yeah, we have more Native American students in our student body than we do white kids. Like,
so when they talk about this prejudice, I get it, but at the same time, that's not it. It's just a lot of people who are very like, no, he's a football star. He's into football. Why would he do this kind of thing? Blah, blah, blah. Like, that's part of it, right? It's just, it's tough because the forensics weren't the same then. So what did they really have to go on? Well, they had all the stuff in the cave. And also, when they found him, BT dubs, because you didn't mention this, when they found him, he was wearing a pair of women's glasses.
Yes. And he was wearing a pair of women's underwear, too. But that's just...
And where did he go?
That's a lot more to unpack than we have time for right now.
Absolutely.
But people really tried to use the fact that he was Native American again, like, oh, well, he's getting framed for this because he's Native American. Right. Because somebody had tried to say, like, oh, well, he had seen the picture of the woman in the cave in one of the officers' desks before the Gene had it. So so people are trying to say all this and then everything, but Lori's parents especially believe that, yes, Gene was the person that killed their daughter. However, they don't believe that he acted alone. So, because of some of the stuff that was out there. One, he would have had to have had enough time to be able to, because the girls were all still alive when he raped them. So he would have had to have been able to have enough time to keep all of them quiet, make sure none of them ran. You're telling me right now that he was able to bind all 3 of them and get all of them. Yeah. Like, on top of the fact of they found a shoe print in the mud that was a 9.5 shoe print.
All he has to do is make them afraid enough to not make a noise and not run away. That's all he has to do.
But think about the kind of girl Lori was.
Sure, that's why he subdued her first.
Do you really think that she would have gone down without a fight? Do you really think that that little girl, with how her mom has described her, with how everybody has described her, would have gone down without a fight?
You don't think that she would have purposely, though, done what she needed to do to protect those girls?
But Michelle and Denise, I fully believe, would have been like, you know what, we're just going to be quiet and hopefully he goes away. Yeah. But I really feel like Lori would have gone kicking and screaming.
So he either subdued her first.
And the fact that Denise was let out into the open. Yeah. Past, because she wasn't killed until she was where the other bodies were. Right. Which means they had to have walked past the counselor's camp. Right. So what stopped her from screaming?
She could have just been scared.
she wasn't already
Have
knocked
you ever
out.
been so scared you haven't been able to speak or make any
But the
noise?
thing is you have but the thing is a fight or flight reflex. I know that we can't say, oh, well, we wouldn't do this unless we were in that situation. But I have been in a situation where it's like, okay, am I going to sit here and be quiet, or am I going to actually do something?
Sure.
And I did.
But how old were you?
I was probably about 10
Right.
when something happened. I was probably about 10 when something happened. So I was about their age.
And you also had a very different, I mean, no offense, but you had a very different upbringing.
Yeah. But they also found in the trail leading from the girls' camp to where the bodies were found, they found 9.5 footprints, shoes, that were made after the rainstorm had ended, before the counselors had gotten up.
Yeah.
Which also proves that there could have been somebody else there.
I suppose. I'm saying it's possible that he could have done it alone.
Yeah,
I'm not saying I think he did.
This stuff, I really feel like, and I agree with Lori's parents too, because there's a whole other thing, and like I said, I'm going to link the article, I'm going to link everything that they say, on the site, but I really do believe that there was at least one other person there.
Yeah.
Because then you have the 3 flashlights in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have things kind of pointing to other people being there.
And it did say, we have a goal.
Yes.
It didn't just say, I have a goal. So.
Yes.
I'm not saying I disagree. I'm just saying he could have done it by himself.
Yeah, he could have done it by himself, and he could have had help, but especially Lori's parents, they definitely do believe that he may have had help.
And we literally can't say.
But he wasn't giving any of that up.
No.
He wasn't giving any of that up. So, in the end, Gene was actually acquitted for the murders, even after the DNA came back later on, saying it was his. A lot of people speculated it was because he was already going back to prison for life. The entire jury knew that when the trial was done, he was going back to prison for 300 years. That was his sentence, was 300 years. So long after this dude's been dead, he's still going to be in prison.
So just to make it clear, to clarify, he did the crime of assaulting, raping the pregnant women and got sent to jail.
And then he
escaped and was missing for 4 years. So then when this trial came on, some people are saying that he was acquitted because they knew he was already going back to jail, and why throw this on here? However, the other side of that is once he's been acquitted, he cannot be charged for the same crime. So even if they were like, here's all the evidence, he totally did it, they can't say legally that he did it.
Yeah.
Which gives no justice to the families.
Yeah. So instead of, just going through the trial, they just acquitted him, and Gene went back to prison to serve a life sentence for his other crimes.
Life plus.
2 months later, he ends up dying from a heart attack while he's working out.
Yeah. Just absolutely no justice.
None. Like, at all. Like I said, Lori's parents fully believe that Gene did it, but he didn't act alone. However, the police never really looked for somebody else because they just wanted the headlines to go away.
I don't blame them.
Like, the police wanted it, the organization wanted it, like, everybody just wanted it to go away. Yeah. So Lori's parents ended up starting the Oklahoma chapter of Murdered Children to help other parents who have gone through situations like this, which is something that I really wish was never out there. There should never be a chapter of murdered children in your state, but unfortunately we have gotten to this point where there is. Lori's mom has actually said in an interview that she often wakes up between 2 and 3 a.m., wondering if that was a time that Lori had passed away. Denise's mom still says to this day, like, she's like, it hurts to talk about. She says sometimes it's easier to remember her as she was, or to not remember her at all, instead of thinking about how she died. And as a mom, I sit here and I think, how traumatized from this you have to be like, and I'm not judging her mom at all. Like, I'm not judging her mom at all and everything.
Grief
but, like,
does things to people, man.
This you have to be to say sometimes it's easier to just not remember her at all. Yeah. And yeah.
Because I can't imagine it's easy to remember what didn't come to pass.
Yeah.
Especially, we live our lives with these expectations.
Well, I think they were able to have viewings for the girls because because regardless of how much trauma was done to all of them, their faces were okay. So a funeral home could have easily hid other things, with a pretty dress and some makeup and stuff. So I feel like I don't know if they were able to have actual viewings for the girls and everything so they could say goodbye, but I hope they did. Michelle's family has requested to keep out of the media light, and honestly really only talks to the other girls' families. I did reach out to Lori's mom and Denise's sister as well. I never heard anything back from them. I just kind of wanted to give them a heads up, like, hey, we are doing your sister and your daughter's case. I just wanted to see if there's anything you wanted to say. If not, it's perfectly fine. You can go ahead and ignore this message and stuff. And for people who don't know, I do that for every message, for every case that we do, is I try to, if the relatives are still alive and I can find them, thank you, Facebook. I try to reach out to the relatives and just kind of be like, hey, like, we're going to be featuring this case. We want to know if there's anything that you want to be said, stuff like that. So
even as far as Scott Peterson's sister, I remember you reached out to her. I think with like Kyron Horman though, like they reached out to us, and I think same thing with Karen Bodine. Carly reached out to us, like, so.
Yeah, and all the families that we have talked to and interacted with have just been absolutely wonderful, and it's hard to. I can see why a lot of people don't do this, though.
Yeah.
But all three families will forever be bonded by a horrible thing that brought them all together. The fact that they all have to wonder who their girls would be, and if there would ever be true justice for their girls than what was given to them, is a very sad story to end on.
Thank you for listening to True Crime and Chill. For more information, including case notes, photos, and sources, visit our website at truecrimeandchill.com. You can also stay connected with us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Look for new episodes from us each week on Tuesday.